Welcome to this episode of Office Origami. My name is Kevin Keeler. I am joined, as usual, by my colleague Tim Banting. But today I'm really excited because we have a special guest with us, David Danto, who is the Director of UC Strategy and Research at Poly. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
So, video and the use of video over the last year and a bit has become and has been a major business tool, helping us keep connections and what have you. On Office Origami, we try to focus on perhaps opportunities where people aren't always taking the best advantage of some of the tools that they have. When we think about video, and I know you think a lot about video, what are some of the areas or what are some of the ways that people might be able to make better use of video as a tool?
That's actually a great question. It's a thinking question. It's not one that you come up with off the tip of your tongue. One of the things that the pandemic, let me start in a different place. The pandemic has taught everyone what those of us in the industry already knew. That video works, that it's easy, that it adds the body language and the connection, adds to culture, adds to better communication. So we were kind of like screaming from the rooftops and nobody was listening to us before the pandemic. And unfortunately, it took that horrific event that we're all still living through for people to realize just how valuable video is. We now use it for talking to relatives and taking classes and everything else that needs to be done. So one of the things that we used to do when we were having these calls pre-pandemic is we would shame people into turning their cameras on. Because yes, you can be on audio and the audio is very important, but without the video, you're not getting that extra connection. And it was funny. There was always this interesting personality. It's a story I've told once in a while, but I don't know if you guys have ever heard it. The idea that a person, man, woman, whoever wakes up in the morning, showers, dresses, get themselves put together, goes to the corner store, buys a cup of coffee and a newspaper, says hi to everybody, rides on the train to the office, says hello to people, maybe plays a game or cards or talks, goes into the office, shakes hands, waves at people, sits down at their desk, and they won't turn on their camera because they don't want people to see what they look like. I've never understood that mentality. We kind of stopped during the pandemic camera shaming. It was hard for me, and I don't mean that to sound egotistical because camera shaming is built into me. It's like, what do you mean you're on a call with video and you're not using it? But during the pandemic, we don't know what people are dealing with, whether it's family situations or crises, of the mind and the body. We don't know what's going on. So I kind of stopped camera shaming, but we're going to come back to that. At some point, once we've passed the biggest parts of the difficulty here, is getting people to actually use the cameras to see what they look like. There's a video of me that's on YouTube somewhere where I was talking about this as an end user in the financial services community for Polycom at the time, telling everybody that and this is a very important point, we tend to demonize people we don't know. If you've ever worked in a large organization, there's the New York office and there's the London office. And we have our act together here in New York, but those idiots over there in London, they don't know what's, you tend to demonize people you don't see. You don't think that they're working, in a positive way. You think negatively. But when you use these tools, when I can see their faces, when I can ask them about their family and their kids and what's going on outside and how did you deal with the hurricane and what's happening in your life, all of a sudden that barrier to collaboration goes away and you develop real camaraderie no matter where you are in the world. And companies that do that effectively can't be competed with by companies that don't. You get rid of that us and them mentality. So the biggest what can you do is turn the damn camera on. Whether it's a desk or in a conference room, use the technology. Now, mind you, our industry is going to need to do a heck of a lot better in conference rooms. I've been saying, I don't want to ramble too much, but I've been saying to everybody, even if you put in a system 2 years ago or a year and a half ago that seems pretty new, you may want to rip it out and put in one of the systems that we're coming up with today because it's smarter, AI, machine learning, it's cheaper. You can drop it in most of the medium and small rooms. So part of it may be making the user interface and the technology a little easier to use, but then just getting people to use it is really the big barrier as far as I'm concerned.
Well, one of the biggest barriers to usage, I think, is making sure you look good. And one of the tips that David gave to me very early on was to use a front lit camera. And I'll tell you what, just that simple thing makes a difference. If I switch my front light off, that looks pretty grim. But in the spirit of Office Origami, the ability to do something with what you've already got, just the simple thing of illuminating your face from the front is a big one. David, you've been in the AV industry for quite some time. I understand you've been involved in TV broadcast. What are other tricks and tips that you've got? I mean, this was a really good one, illuminating yourself from the front. What else is good?
Absolutely. I mean, like here's a made for webcasting, made for video light, awesome company called LoomCube. I won't turn it on because right. I'm not pitching any one of them. Here's another one made by Lytra. And these are all cool tools to have. They're nice. They're rings that you can buy now to illuminate. While those are nice to have, they're really unnecessary. I've got a $29.95 lamp here that I bought off of Amazon. I won't give the brand. I don't know where it's made. It's probably made in China, where it can let me change the color temperature from daylight to tungsten to both. It'll let me dim it. The key is to you don't have to waste a lot of money. Even if you just put a lamp behind the camera, you always want to look at in broadcasting what's referred to as 3-point lighting. It's a light 45 degrees off to the center of angle, a light 45 degrees off to the other, roughly. It doesn't have to be exactly. So those two corners, and then something illuminating the back of your head, which separates you out from the background. If you can manage 3-point lighting, now my backlight isn't actually a light on me right now. It's just a little lamp bouncing off of a duct that I have up here. But you can sort of see a little halo around my hair, which separates me out. It adds depth. And then, as you point out, if I were to turn these lights off and get ugly, the camera I'm using is a Poly P15. It's an awesome camera. It's going to pick up in low light circumstances, but there's a tremendous difference how I appear to you, how honest I appear, how sincere and connected I appear without those lights on. So it's just, again, that's my fill light. Just adds a little bit of extra piece, and this is the one I use as my key light. I accidentally made it a little too bright there. And it's a night and day difference. So yes, using lighting, knowing your circumstances that you're in. If you're in a room and you're using microphones in the room, please be careful not to do too much paper shuffling on the table, because when you're in front of a microphone, even though the good systems filter it out, it can sometimes sound like a thunderstorm on the other side. When you're at home, I have the gorgeous opportunity to use this P15 because I'm in a private office. I'm in my basement, so I can use hands free. If not, I've always got, this is one of my headsets, the Voyager Focus. Use a headset if you need to. The audio device, the headset, which you would pick based on persona, what you do and how you do it. You have to think about it as having a dual function. Yes, it will give you the better audio, but if I'm using noise canceling, it'll also give me the better audio. I won't hear the guys outside with the lawnmower or my cats or my kids, which is a benefit sometimes and it's a curse. But it's interesting to think about when you put in these systems that have, some of the new AI noise block, our noise block AI and acoustic fence and things like that. I don't know if you watch American football ever, but you sometimes, if you look at it, you'll see things on the screen that aren't on the field. You'll see the yard marker and how far you have to go to increase. So the people watching at home arguably have a better than being there experience. When you use some of these tools, if I'm in the conference room with you and the siren goes by or somebody's chewing rapidly or typing, I have to hear that. But if using these tools, when I'm on the other side, I have a better than being there experience. I don't have to hear the siren. I don't have to hear the typing. So using the right tools and some of these new features really makes a difference. That's why I'm saying to bring it all the way back to what I started with is get some of the newer systems, because you don't have a lot of these features on the older systems.
Yeah. What about just a quick one as well? What about framing? What sort of what should we be looking for? I've heard about rule of thirds, I think, in photography somewhere, but is that right? I can't remember what it means.
Rule of thirds, or just generally what we refer to as production rules, is the understanding of what well-produced television looks like. It's the idea of, if you're looking at a one shot of me right now, I have a little bit of headroom over here, so I'm not like coming off the top. I don't have what appears to be too much. My eyes are kind of in the middle nose center of the camera. The camera is placed at my eye level. Very, very important. In conference rooms, you have these people who like to put cameras way on top of a screen or up from the. You really want to get the cameras that are picking you up at the eye level of the speaker or the participant, because you literally introduce an effect that has a subconscious meaning to people when you don't. If you're looking up at people, you're elevating them. You actually get that appearance that you're looking up to them. They're bigger than you are. And if you're looking down at people, subconsciously we feel that as well. That, oh my God, look at these little people down there. We're better than them. So eye level is very important. The production framing rules. And then if you start to get into some of the cool things that some of the poly gear does, the presenter tracking, where we can keep that rule of thirds framing,
Right.
rapidly as somebody walks around a room, or if two people start to talk, we realize, oh my gosh, two people are talking. We'll know whether the right thing to do is ease the camera over to the other person, or maybe put up a two-shot, or maybe just cut to the other person, and all that's happening on a solid-state camera. No moving parts, no zoom lens. It's all just built in to the technology and these awesome sensors that we have, like in our new E70, where you can put one of these cameras in, and it'll do. It's a built-in TV director. I feel kind of stupid having 4 years of college for television production. Now I can just buy a camera that knows everything I know about it.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
good tips.
So I mean, my takeaway is when I have negotiations, I'm gonna look down. I'm gonna put the camera really low to give myself better presence.
If you,
But
I swear to God, if you ease it a little bit, you will introduce that feeling in your viewers' minds.
oh, that's there you go. That's a good tip. And talking about like the hardware and the software, because I think depending on the tools, like where we happen to be recording this with Microsoft Teams, but we could be using something else. And you talked about like some of the cameras do the auto framing and what have you, but like what's your feeling on the importance of the software versus the hardware? And also, how do we help people get the most out of both of those, right? Because sometimes there's settings and it's not always as intuitive, which settings to be turned on. So hardware, software, and how do we help people get the most out of both?
A great question, and I kind of want to approach it from two different perspectives. The first one is that, again, speaking from the perspective of living through the pandemic, companies that weren't in the cloud really couldn't cope and compete with the scale of collaboration that most large enterprises have had to deal with. There were still some people that had direct connections internally and hardware bridges and concentrators, and if there was ever that question, we've been talking about it for a couple of decades now about the journey to the cloud. If you're not there on the cloud right now, whether it's Teams or any of the other platforms we're talking about, you weren't able to really compete. So that's where software drove. All the hardware bridges, all the hardware switching, all the hardware connections, that's moved completely into software. And we couldn't have accomplished what we did, certainly during this pandemic, but ever, if we hadn't had that in place. So definitely in the agility to change, and there were some security questions on some of the platforms. There were some feature races. One of the things I like to talk about, if you look at car ads, automobile ads going back 20, 30 years ago, they're talking about mileage and safety, and now they're talking about your Bluetooth connections and whether you have a smart assistant in the car.
Right.
A technology has passed its muster when it stops talking about reliability and starts talking about features. In video collaboration, we've done that. We're no longer talking about, hey, it works, and hey, you connect, and hey, this. We're talking about, look at my virtual background, look at my classroom background, look at my security. So that's one thing we couldn't have done without the software introduction in the industry.
Right.
The other piece of this question that you need to talk about is it's a difficult subject to talk about because no one will ever change their minds. It's religious, honestly. Whether you believe your enterprise should be set up with general compute PCs of whatever flavor you like all over the place because that's what you want to manage, or whether or not you believe that general compute PCs are subject to viruses and breaches and agility that could screw things up, and you really want to put appliances everywhere because appliances are more stable and easier to manage. Anybody who believes either one is not going to be convinced of the other. So we at Poly believe very strongly that we need to support both of them. When you do a deployment, whether it's at home or in an office of any size room, and you want that to be based on a general compute engine, you'll be using one of our USB tools. We can talk about the awesome Poly Studio and some of our other camera places, and certainly at home, the P series, the P15 that I'm using today, P21, and some of the others. It doesn't matter what engine you want to use. It doesn't matter what you click. It just works. The key, though, the difference between us and some of the other people that do that is we are building plenty of technology inside the hardware of the device, even though it's a software deployment. There's no software in the world that you can overlay on a camera whose responsibility it is to track the presenter and do it quickly. It doesn't work quickly.
Right.
Framing, tracking, you have to have that technology, the acoustic fence technology built into the device, so it's feeding the general compute PC with the best shot, the best audio, the best video. There are a number of people that prefer, and I'm in that camp as well. I won't hide it. An appliance in rooms because you can scale it faster and easier. There is no ancillary software update. Ooh, we just put a patch in for our virus protection, and it knocked out all the cameras, which has happened at least twice in my lifetime. The only thing that goes to that device are firmware that's intended for that device. So it's easier to scale, it's easier to manage, and platforms like Teams, that started only, on general compute, are now starting to get closer to parity for some of the appliance devices that are out there. So again, neither is wrong. It depends on what you prefer to manage, but you always want to find devices, whether it's an appliance or a peripheral, that have the intelligence and the ability to give you these next generation features built into the device, not on the platform.
Well, one other thing we're seeing as well, David, is more of a move towards a multi-service capable device rather than a specific fit for purpose end-to-end, XYZ or XYZ if we're in Canada and UK. I got my own dig in there, but thanks for calling me an idiot based in London. I know you well, so I'll take that one on the chin. But
I was just using it as an example because I knew you'd appreciate it.
There we go. But we're seeing more of a multi-service capable device rather than this sort of XYZ manufacturer end-to-end solution that is, hardware, software, all within my own ecosystem. But what we're seeing now, I think, is more of a multi-service capable device. Have you got any thoughts about that from an industry perspective? Because it seems to be quite an important trend that seems to be taking place. And I guess, from an end user perspective, my switching costs are going to be lower if I'm using a cloud-based solution because I don't have to buy everything on-prem. And if my business needs change, I can change services. But of course, if I have to keep changing the hardware every time I change my service, that starts to become quite expensive.
Yeah, and again, there are multiple opinions about this, and I certainly don't want to offend anybody. So I'm going to speak to you from my personal perspective, not necessarily Polly's or anybody else's. The era of buying a device that works on your platform only, in my opinion, is long over. We need to start treating our devices for collaboration like we treat our mobile phones. If I want to use application A today and application B tomorrow, that's what I need to be able to do. And if I want to go from provider A to provider B, in most cases, if they're both on the same type of network, you just keep your phone and change providers. That's really where we're going in the collaboration industry. All of the Poly endpoints are agnostic that way. Whether we're talking about the USB endpoints that can connect to a general compute, and obviously it's just based on the compute what you connect to, or we're talking about the appliances, our appliances are natively compatible and certified with I don't want to bring up too many names here, but 6, 7, 8, and a growing list of platforms that will continue to grow. So there's never that forklift requirement that if next month you want to change to a different provider, you've got to throw out all your gear and buy new gear. That's one of the most important things in terms of what's going on with Poly, and we support that today with our Studio X products, our G7500 product, and as I said, our USB products. They all give you that ability, no more hardware lock-in. We're also getting to a point where we want it to be more like our cell phones in our conference rooms. We want to be able to walk in at 9 o'clock and do a Teams call, and 10 o'clock and do a Zoom call, and 11 o'clock do a WebEx call. And that's going to become a very critical point in our industry, probably for the next 18 to 24 months, especially as, hopefully the variants we're dealing with in the pandemic end and we start making that trip back to the office we've been talking about. There's a lot of controversy as to how to do that. There are some companies that want to say, buy my device and we'll set up a menu, press your button and go. There are a lot of platforms that say, if you're going to sell a product certified for my platform, you're not going to allow it to switch to one of my competing platforms. So again, it's not a technology issue. It's more, a relationship issue. And the platforms have their reasons to want to make sure that it stays simple and certified. Simplification and ease of use on the platform is one of the ways to get to certification. So a lot of that's going to play out, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to go. You may see some of the platforms out there agree to be part of a joint capability at some point in the future on various manufacturers. You may see some manufacturers develop a phone app that lets you just, switch it on your phone and connect with the endpoint. I'm not 100% sure how that's going to go because it's not all technical, it's political. And then a number of the applications say, no, we want you in our application because if you want to connect to application B or C or D or platform B or C or D, we give you a way to do that through our platform. So the importance of it is there. but we can't lie about it. You know, people are going to come back to the office and expect the ease of use that they had at home, where they look at a link, click on it, and don't care what it is. That's a brick wall that we're headed for as more people head back to an office. How we eventually come out dealing with it, you know, we'll kind of have to keep an eye on it and see what wins and what doesn't.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the simplification is important to keep in mind. You know, the people that use this on a daily basis, if you have a chance to observe people walking into a room, and if it's in a different mode, even though it's relatively straightforward to put it back to the regular mode, you do see people struggle with that, right? And therefore, I think the uptake of some of this technology is diminished. And I've been on 2 vendor calls recently where the vendor of the platform, the group of people, in one case couldn't figure out how to start the recording, maybe because the button had been moved around. And on the other case, the person muted all of the participants, including the presenter, partly because there was somebody who had forgotten to mute. So they just were like, let's mute all. So, and these were, people that this was their own platform. So I do think as that gets sorted out, it'll be interesting to see if, the end users vote by figuring out this as they walk into different rooms and different offices, right?
To that point, to that point, you might find that people don't end up walking in rooms and they just use an external USB device from their desktop because it's easier rather than carrying your laptop in to take notes anyway.
Right.
And, it's a fascinating idea. It'd be really interesting to see what happens, whether or not people will go back to, decamping from their desk and hope that someone else doesn't walk into their open plan office and steal their desk as they go to take a meeting. Or it's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
But we're inadvertently breaking all the rules of the scientific method, which are let's not change more than one variable at a time. I certainly refer to you, Kevin, in terms of the need for adoption training, because even if something seems simple, it isn't always to everybody else. Part of the issue is, does the enterprise really have 99% of its communication internal? Now, I don't know enterprises that do that, but many do. So it's easier for those organizations to say, this is our platform, be on it, you're done, as opposed to organizations that are always connecting to customers and providers, and then you have to have a lot more ability to do that. And then even if you are an enterprise that's connecting to multiple partners, providers, customers, there are many that have strict compliance issues. So the end users can't simply pick the platform they want to be on. They have to be on the platform that meets all the compliance guidelines for the firm. So we're playing with that, with returning from the pandemic, with everything. There's a lot of variables moving. And one of the things I said to a good friend of mine recently is this would all be really fun to sit back and get popcorn and watch if there weren't people dying in the process. The social experiment would be really interesting to see how it turns out. I think you're right. It's going to have to shake itself out, and we're going to see where it is in a couple of years. But video is here to stay. And the other part to understand, and it's critical for people that are, designing workplaces and coming, there will be less people in offices, whether you're the biggest adopter of remote working like I am, or the biggest naysayer of remote working. Doesn't matter if you think it's going to be 1% more or 80% more. There are going to be more people remote for every meeting. So even though office floor plans and office buildings can shrink, and should, because there's savings to be found there, we can't anymore say that, all right, well, there are 10 conference rooms on the floor and only one of them is getting video to save money. Because first of all, it's cheaper. And second of all, every room is going to need to have that capability to connect to the larger body of remote people. Right. So we're in for an explosion in the space for at least the next couple of years as we compensate and figure out what the societal changes are going to lead to the technology changes.
Okay, so no, that's fantastic information, a great discussion. 2 quick hits because we've got you, David. And I think about these things, and I'm very interested to hear what your thinking is. So asynchronous video, this idea that it's like I kind of record a video message and I use that. I personally haven't done that type of thing. What's your thinking about that as an asynchronous messaging, mechanism?
It's not new, but it's been newly put forward again for people leaving video calls or video mail. Honestly, I think it's better internal to an organization, especially when there's time shifting going on. If I'm recording an all hands meeting
Right.
Or if I want to speak to my teams, and my teams are around the globe, then having that available to people when they want to take it in, whether that's a one-on-one message or a one-to-many message, I really think there's value in that. Personally, I work I work in an awesome company. I would consider us a medium-sized enterprise. We're not as big as some of the big financials or pharmaceutical
Right.
companies. And I can't even click on a link from you without it going through some check and balance to make sure that it's the right link. If I try and copy it into an email, I get this long string that involves the company we use to scan the stuff. So I don't know how effective video mail would be
Right.
for selling or for cold calling or for outside the firm. And then you have things like the paid platform. I don't know if I should mention their name or not, but where you can have a celebrity record a message for you. So I think it'll find a place. I don't, in my mind, think it's going to be a big place, but I
Okay.
think it's a place. I definitely think on-demand content for internal learning is critical because you can't
Right.
manage your stuff without that.
Of course. So the other quick thing that what about things like this persistent video, like this idea of having, I don't know, in the office, some kind of wall where if you're remote, you can choose to just turn that on and you can see people walking by and to try to connect, create that connection. What's your thoughts on something like that?
There's one large company out there right now putting forward a product. They kind of touted it as new. I kind of had conversations with them. I know them very well. They're good friends. I don't really find it as new. I've been doing that 20, 25 years ago because there are circumstances that require it. When I was working in financial services, there are a number of traders, commodity traders and
Right.
specific areas where they have this level of communication where they need to stand up and do hand signals very quickly. And when they're doing this around the globe. So you have Asia Pac, you have EMEA, and you have US people. Traditionally they've had these little squawk boxes on their desk where they press a button and they tell somebody what to do in a verbal shorthand. We discovered at one of the financial services companies that by putting in a persistent chat video window at the end of the trading desk, so the New York trading desk could see the Tokyo and the London desk, they
Okay.
could stand up and do a hand signal with their partner, and just the 20 seconds that it saved from having to press the button on the squawk box translated monthly into hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So there's a great example of where you can use that technology to really increase camaraderie and communication around the globe and have it on all the time. Another one which is awesome when you're moving to another facility physically or being absorbed by a facility. It's great to set up persistent chat rooms. This was the beginning of telepresence, by the way, before the telepresence companies came out, where like here's the North New York office and here's the South New York office and here's room 1 and room 2, and room 1 and room 2 are always on with each other all the time. So I say I would go meet you in room 1 or room 2, or London and New York again, where the London team says, "Look, I'm going to head to the New York room so I can have a chat with New York." You book it, you just walk in and go. So there's no
I see.
changing, there's no calling, it's always on. Those are circumstances where it's really useful, especially like I said, absorbing companies, moving companies, where there's going to be a lot of stuff going on at the same time. You just reserve the room and forget about the technology. You can also put them at water coolers. We have them at companies in pantries. So when somebody goes into the pantry to have
Right.
lunch, you can see the pantry at the other location. Helps a little with camaraderie. I don't see as wide an application for it as is being made out to be, but for those applications that really need it, it's awesome. There's now a product on the market that does it.
Well, that's great. No, those are great examples. I love the trading example, and yeah, and I like this idea of this. Yeah, go to the demon London office. I'm going to go talk to. I don't think he called you an idiot. I think he said you're a demon. So there you go. So.
What I
I
said
don't know. I have to watch the playback.
What I said was that people tend to demonize people they don't see every day. They don't think well of them. I'll give you one quick cultural example to redeem myself. When I was in charge of global installations for a financial services company, when I would have meetings in New York and we would talk about what we're doing, people would tell me exactly why I'm an idiot, why none of this would work, why this is a bad idea, why that's a bad idea. When I would go across the pond and have those meetings with my team in the UK, they would sit through the meetings, they would nod, they would be happy, they would say, "We got it, it's perfect, we love it, it's terrific." Then they would wait for beer call at the end of the day, and when we were down at the pub, that's when they would tell me I was an idiot. So it's just different cultures, and as we come together, either at a pub or over video, that demonizing tends to shrink away.
No, and I think that that's a great point. It is being able to see, and you said at the beginning as well, even being able to see people, especially in their home environment with their pets, with their kids, I mean, that not, that is the opposite. That humanizes all of us. So I appreciate you spending this time with Tim and I, and some great tips in terms of how people can both, make more of what they already have, but also as they're heading back into the office, if you're on the IT pro side, maybe some things you want to think about, or the facility side in terms of reconfiguring that may involve some new hardware or new software, and certainly some training, and also figuring out in this great social experiment, what users are going to actually use. But we appreciate your time, David, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure.